is a special presentation on ESPN Classic.
In your father's day, the mecca of boxing was Madison Square Garden. I think by the 80s that had changed. The hottest place to fight was outdoors at Caesar's Palace.
Ray's exposure and stardom was just mushrooming. And for Ray to be fighting on national television outdoors at Caesar's Palace was just something very special and significant.
The people's choice was Ray Boom Boom Mancini, a predatory, hard-hitting mover who was defending his WBA lightweight title for the second time. Although his opponent, South Korean Duk Koo Kim, was not well known in the U.S., he soon proved himself more than worthy to the homegrown favorite.
I knew I was in for war. I knew I was in for a hard, difficult fight. I was fighting for his country. Those are the hardest guys to fight. First punch, he throws a lead left-handed kick to me on the chin. Knocks me back. And it's on. From that moment on, it was on.
It was amazing the shots that both of them took. Ray would take the first half of the round, come out and look like, he would dominate. You'd have that sick feeling in your stomach because Kim would always come back in every round and rally.
Mancini knows he's in there with a tough customer. Another left scored by Kim.
I said, who the f*** is this guy? That's what I said about 10 times. They just pounded each other. It was like two rams going against each other. You didn't have time to even think. It was survival.
It also became obvious during the course of this fight that this was not going to be a fighter who would totally succumb to the pressure of Mancini. He landed so many punches against Kim, and Kim didn't go anywhere. And you started to say to yourself, this is becoming a remarkable story.
What many had expected to be an easy victory for Mancini turned into a brawl reminiscent of the classic battles in the decade following World War II. It featured the likes of Carmen Basilio, Jake LaMotta, and Rocky Graziano. On November 13th, 1982, Mancini got as much as he gave.
In the third round, his ear was torn open. He damaged his left hand very badly in the fourth round. By the middle rounds, his eye was cut and virtually swollen. It required enormous bravery to fight through what he had to fight through.
This is the only fight in my career. Even if I lost, this is the only fight in my career I ever felt like quitting in the middle of the fight.
To me, it was the fight that symbolized Ray Mancini as a fighter more than any other. Tremendous action fight, a long fight, a lot of give and take. Ray Mancini dishing out a lot of punishment and taking a lot of punishment.
You watch the fight and you keep seeing more of the same, which is two guys refusing to quit. And as it goes on, you ask the question with increasing frequency, how long? How long can this go on before one guy breaks?
People began to realize it was something more than an exhibition, something more than a normal prize fight.
Yeah, because he has his feet.
It was the most well-matched fight I ever saw, which means if they keep applying themselves, there's only one way for it to end.
I'd fight each round like it's life and death. One of us is getting carried out of here tonight. That was my attitude. So I never thought of winning or losing. We would know who the winner is because only one of us is going to be standing.
I think that Ray Mancini has never left Youngstown. I think Ray Mancini will always be a Youngstown guy.
The Youngstown of the 50s and 60s was a absolutely booming town.
All you heard was whistles, pipes banging,
trains going. Your father worked in the mill and retired from the mill. Your grandfather worked in the mill and retired from the mill. You were going to work in the mill.
Youngstown, man, it was the best back in the 60s, you know, when the steel mills were booming. This town was vibrant, alive.
Born in the East Ohio steel town in March of 1961, Ray was the youngest of three. His sister Ellen was 13 years older, and his brother Lenny Jr. preceded him by 5 years. His mother was Irish, his father Italian, and he took after both.
He was a tough, scrappy little kid, but always very, very respectful. He has the heart of a lion of the father and a discipline and tenacity of the mother.
Ray was very religious. They went to church each Sunday. They put a premium on hard work, accomplishment, loyalty, and love of family.
Prize fighting didn't come to Ray by chance. His father, Lenny Boom Boom Mancini, was a promising lightweight. In May of 1941, he lost a disputed split decision to Sammy Angot. That December, Angot won the world title, and a rematch with Mancini was being negotiated as the U.S. was gearing up for World War II.
Lenny Mancini was a banger, and he was destined to become great before December 7th, 1941.
My father wanted a rematch, of course, but this time for the title. The date was supposed to be February. He got called to the Army. He was drafted, and he was to leave in January.
He got injured bad in the war, and he was laid up in a hospital for like 7 months. Never got to fight the guy.
My father never talked bad about it. Never said, you know, I got a raw deal. Never. But I could see how it pained him, the fact that he never got that opportunity.
If Lenny Mancini wanted to forget what might have been, his younger son had no such notion. Ray grew up living through his father's past.
I'd be in the basement by myself, and I'd have a little flashlight, and I'd see the pictures, and I'd say, man, I want to be that guy.
Ray would read all the articles on his dad and, you know, how he was the uncrowned champion. And just from the time he was a little kid, he had this burning desire. I want to win this championship for my father.
For all of Ray's determination to finish his father's business, it was his brother Lenny Jr. who seemed more talented in the ring and out of it.
Man, he was a handsome son of a gun and charming. And he was a player. All the girls loved him. He liked to live on the edge.
Lenny was the funniest kid I've ever known in my life. He'd give you the shirt off his back, man. Lenny had a wild side about him, no doubt. Ray didn't have that.
What Ray had was a mission and motivation. Borrowing his father's nickname, Boom Boom won 43 of 50 amateur bouts, 23 by knockout. In 1979, fight manager David Wolf deployed trainer Murphy Griffith to find a fresh prospect at the National Golden Gloves tournament.
The first night, he called me, and he said, I've seen a little Rocky Graziano. He's not going to win any amateur titles, but as a pro, he's going to be sensational.
At age 18, Ray left Youngstown for the mean streets of New York with his father's blessing.
My father told me, if you stay here, you'll starve, like I did. I'll never forget, it was September 18, 1979. I was crying like a baby, man. I didn't want to leave. He said, no, you gotta go, you gotta go. I knew I wasn't coming back unless I was successful.
"17 months after he left home, on Valentine's Day 1981, Ray learned that his brother was accidentally shot and killed by his girlfriend.
I had to be the one to call Raymond to let him know. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
I'll never forget to Raymond, I got some bad news. What happened? And I could hear her, cry. She says, then he got shot. He's dead. Raymond, he's dead. I just screamed out, and I couldn't believe it. I fell to the floor.
I could tell through the phone, I could see it. All I heard was this agonizing no, screaming no, no.
I flew in the next day See, my sister, we just held each other and cried. You know, it was like, wow, you know, this is reality. And driving in to Youngstown, you know, everything's in slow motion. But I remember I said, I want to see him. And so we got a call from the funeral home to say that the body had arrived. So we drove up there so I could say goodbye. It's just something you can't believe.
I was numb. My dad sat there, and he was numb. Ray just couldn't stop crying the whole time. It was heartbreaking, it really was.
His dad was a rock. During the wake and the funeral, he just sat there and just held it inside. And then they took Ray over to my house. I had just heard this noise, and I didn't know what it was at first. And it was this terrible, terrible weeping. And it was his dad finally letting it all out. And Ray saying, "Dad, I don't have to go." And Lenny saying, "No, Ray, you have to go."
It was a crossroads moment for me because if I didn't leave then, like I said, I never get on with my life. I'd rely on my faith, and I left to go pursue my career. Because if not, you stay home, you suffocate, you crawl in a hole, you just become one of the many.
4 weeks later, Mancini made his cable television debut in Madison Square Garden's Felt Forum.
Left hook did it.
He knocked out Norman Goins in the second round.
We buried my brother. That was over. I grieved enough, and now it's time to move on. And I used that as motivation. I win that fight, and then the following month, I get offered my first network television fight on CBS. So, bing, 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 things happen right away.
Ray was able to shelve his grief and get ready for that fight with Goins in a way that belied how young he was and was just an indication of how he would be able to cope with tragedies to come.
Youngstown, Ohio has always been a factory town. It was one of those cities in the Midwest where once factory jobs started leaving, it started basically crumbling in terms of its infrastructure and its population.
In Youngstown, it was devastating because guys who thought they were secure in those jobs, pensions and so forth, suddenly there wasn't anything. So the town practically overnight just kind of almost dried up and blew away.
Maybe if you were an economic analyst, you could see it coming, but if you were a steel worker raised with the single-minded thought of following your father into the mill for one of those jobs, you couldn't or wouldn't imagine what it would be like to have the blast furnaces ever cooled down.
There was nothing positive coming out of Youngstown at that time. They used to have a bumper sticker, last one leaving Youngstown, turn the lights out.
The evacuation was painful and dispiriting. On September 19, 1977, more than 4,000 steel workers lost their jobs. By the early 1980s, the inhabitants looked beyond their city's vacant factories and mills for a sign of hope. They found it in a favorite son.
He gave them something to be proud of, something to look forward to, something exciting, something good about this area because the area was going down. He gave people what they needed. He brought the whole community together.
As a former sports writer, Mancini's manager, David Wolf, saw the value in a good story. In 1981, he sold his fighter to CBS as a rugged piece of Americana, a survivor of the changing times. When the network's PR department had spun its magic, Boom Boom was a known name in mainstream culture.
He drew fans that were not boxing fans because CBS, in its advertising, in its lead-ins to the fight, told the story of Ray and his father over and over again. And Ray became a well-known face on American television, and people fell in love with him.
After the Rocky fable has already hit the screen, we have a real-life Rocky, an ethnic, American, hard-working guy, tough, willing to take a punch to give one. What Boom Boom Mancini was in effect a real-life boxing fable produced by CBS Sports.
There's something that's magnetic about a true life hero. Sylvester Stallone is not Rocky Balboa. Ray Mancini is Ray Mancini. He had a great backstory, and what we did with him was just document what was there.
Undefeated in 18 professional fights, Mancini won the NABF lightweight belt in May of 1981 with a 9th-round TKO of Jorge Morales. That October, the Mancini family finally got its world title shot. Ray would face a legend, WBC champion Alexis Arguello.
Alexis Arguello was one of the greats. Magnificent fighter with great firepower, great punching power. He had leverage on leverage.
Even at a very young age, just around 20-ish, here was Ray Mancini already appearing to be a veteran in the sport, which was both good and bad, because in my opinion, he ended up fighting Alexis Arguello a couple of years earlier in his career than he should have.
I beat the number 6 contender, I beat the number 3 contender. Where do you go from there? Now they offer me to fight Arguello. Of course you got to take it. I used to tell people, ask my father how many opportunities there are to get for a world title fight. Guess what? There ain't no next time around.
Armed with youth, passion, and the imperative of his family history, Mancini met the older and wiser Arguello.
Ray Mancini fought the fight of his life for 10 rounds. He executed perfectly. They had a game plan. He did everything as well as you could do it.
We get in there and boom, I jump on him. I'm boxing him. I'm banging that body. I mean, the fight's going according to plan.
After 10 rounds, it's an even fight. I mean, it can go either way. But that's when Arguello turned it on.
At the end of the 12th round, I throw right hand from the outside, and he throws right hand at the same time. His lands first. I go to one knee. I get up. I stagger to the ropes. The bell rings.
In the 14th round, the 20-year-old challenger began to feel the wear and tear of a championship bout.
All of a sudden, he hit me with that left hook over the top of my right hand. Boom, staggered me, hit me with that uppercut to the body, then hit me with the right hand. My head shot back, I went down.
Ultimately, Alexis Arguello's excellence, his experience, and the fact that he's a Hall of Fame fighter won out against Ray Mancini. But no one's ever fought to the limit of their abilities more than Ray Mancini did during that fight.
He and Arguello had a wonderful, almost big brother, little brother embrace and conversation in the ring where Arguello told him, one day you'll be a champion.
I felt completely defeated in every way, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. My father just held me and hugged me and said, man, you're my champ.
I remember him crying in the locker room, apologizing for his dad, and his dad said, Ray, don't you apologize. You fought a hell of a fight. You did a great job.
Let me ask you, did that fight leave any either emotional or physical scars on you?
None at all. Like I said, I'm a professional fighter, professional athlete. Sometimes dumb things happen, and you just got to come pick up the pieces and come back stronger, which I'm going to do.
That was October 3rd. I was back in the ring 2 months later. You have to. Same thing with my brother. My brother passed. I had to move on. You pick yourself up, you heal up, move on, man. I knew after that I had everything it took to be world champion.
Just 7 months later, with 2 more wins under his belt, Mancini was given another title shot, this time against WBA champion Arturo Frias.
Mancini Frias turned out in 1 round to be what Hagler and Hearns a few years later would be in 3 rounds. Just wall-to-wall action.
In that short period of time, there were more punches thrown and more excitement than you would get normally in an 8 or 9 or 10 round fight.
All of a sudden, he hit me with a good left hook. Boom, staggers me. All I remember is thinking, I just want to survive. My trainer used to tell me, 1 or 2 things you're going to do. You get hit, you're going to fire back or you're going to cover up. Well, I chose to fire back.
It was the worst thing that could happen to Frias because he thought he had Ray. And he came at Ray with a vengeance.
and made Ray fight, and Ray just beat him to a pulp.
I threw like a double left hook. Boom. Hurt him, throw the right hand. Boom, boom, boom. I drop him. Oh! Now I feel like Hercules, man. Now, forget about it, man. I'm like on top, I got that juice, man. I'm energized. And I just jumped on him, man. I wasn't going to let him off the hook. When he raised my hand, it was such a euphoric feeling. The only thing that compared to it was seeing each one of my children born. It hits me every time. I get emotional about it every time I see it.
What they had went through as a family, losing his brother, and his drive all those years to become a champion. And he accomplished it. Those emotions were there in the ring between him and his father. They were crying. He was kissing him. This is your belt. This is for you, Dad. This is for you. It was very emotional.
It was so surreal, man. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful moment that I finally was able to accomplish that and give that to my father.
If you didn't get positively affected emotionally by this story, you didn't have a heart. And now, at a time in boxing, when you have fighters like Larry Holmes and Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns and Marvin Hagler, Ray Mancini's the king.
It's very difficult to get there, but it's much harder to stay there. I won the title from my father, but now it was the personal challenge of trying to be a good champion.
After winning his first title defense in July of 1982, a sixth-round TKO of Ernesto España, Mancini faced his next challenger, Duke Koo Kim. Although the South Korean owned a 17-1-1 record, he had never fought in the United States.
Nobody knew anything about him. The only thing looking at his record that stood out was that nobody ever heard of any of his opponents.
Duke Koo Kim was not supposed to be that difficult opponent for Mancini. But in fact, he was a very, very tough Korean.
When Murphy Griffith and I initially got the tapes of Kim, we were not pleased at all. We could tell that this guy was a rough, tough customer and that we were in for a serious fight.
I'll never forget, Dave sent me a tape. Bang, bang, big punches. Never took a backward step. I said, oh, man, that's a headache. That's a headache. I said, it's going to be a war, Dave. It's going to be a war.
The 23-year-old Kim, who was raised in the coastal village of Kojin on the Sea of Japan, claimed he had been raised by a wealthy family.
His mother's from the hometown as mine. That area is the farm country. Duke Kim is a very poor family because his father, his mother didn't have land. She told me that she was pregnant with Duke Kim just before his father died.
He moved out to Sokcho and had a hard time. And then he moved out to Seoul and started to do boxing. He knew boxing was hard, but also that it was worthy of challenge. He said he would succeed in boxing.
True to his word, Kim won the Orient and Pacific lightweight title in 1982 and defended it 3 times. With no challengers left, the WBA's #1 contender set his sights on Mancini's crown.
We met in our hometown. He said, "It is the last chance for me. Unless I win the match, I am not going to come back here. All the choice I have is to win or to die. That's all."
He even had a muffin in his hotel room before his match with Mancini. When asked what it was, he just said, "If I don't die, then the other one will."
It was the Wednesday before the fight, and I had an interview with Duke Koo Kim in his room. Just as the interview was ending, the translator took me over to the dresser where there was a lampshade with some Korean lettering on it. And I asked him what it meant, and he said it was live or die. And I took that to mean kill or be killed.
Our dressing rooms were lying next to each other. And we're preparing like we normally do. All of a sudden, I'm hearing over there, oh, bah, bah, bah. He's rattling the lockers. There's lockers shaking and banging. Ah, bah, bah, bah.
It's Kim. It's Kim getting worked up before a fight, letting out these blood-curdling screams. You know, it's not what I would want to hear before I get in the ring.
Oh, my camp is quiet. I kind of look over and I said, well, I guess we're in for a rough one today, huh?
And there's the bell, and we are underway, and the Korean comes out swinging.
It was so exciting, and yet it was brutal. It was brutal. It was just two warriors going at it.
There was one moment in the fight, I hit him with a punch, bang, bang, bang. He steps back, does this, and the crowd goes crazy. I said, oh man, you gotta be kidding me.
And that's the most devastating thing I think you can do psychologically to another fighter, is take his best shot and prove to him it didn't hurt me at all. It scared the hell out of Mancini. And at that point, he told me, I felt like quitting.
After 8 of the scheduled 15 rounds, one official scored the fight even, while the other 2 had Mancini slightly ahead.
He was dominating, and he did that throughout the rounds, but Kim would always come back and rally second half of the round.
Tank, myself, we said to each other, you're gonna have to kill this guy to stop it. To this day, that kind of bothers me that I said that. Because I didn't mean it that way.
We didn't speak the same language, we come from worlds away. Yet when I was in there, I knew him better than his wife, his mother, best friend. I knew him better than anybody in the world because I knew what was on his inside. I saw what was on his inside.
It was all the good things about boxing and the bad things about boxing. The heart, the dedication, and yet there's the brutality, because the sweet science kind of went out the window for this fight. Most of the time, you had to punch back to survive.
I don't think he endured as much pain in any fight up to that point as he did in the Kim fight.
My body ached so much, my head hurt so much during that fight. But it's funny how the body feels one way, the mind tells you another. The strength of mind is what kept me in that fight.
After winning the 9th round on 2 of the 3 cards, Kim began to show signs of fatigue. In the 11th, the challenger's knee hit the canvas, but referee Richard Green did not rule it a knockdown.
The thing about Ray Mancini, is one of the underrated aspects of him, is that he was a murderous body puncher. And I think his body work in this fight really had an impact on Duke Kim. And I think that, more than anything else, started to erode Kim as the fight went on.
Mancini was a marvelously conditioned athlete, an athlete who applied pressure for 15 rounds, who was trained to go 15 rounds, who benefited from the fact that title fights were 15 rounds. Those championship rounds, rounds 11 through 15, that was Mancini's time. That's when he turned it on, and that's when he took control.
Early in round 13, Mancini landed 39 punches. Not one was returned.
All of a sudden, towards the close of the round, he comes back. You don't know where this energy is coming from.
He backs up and he starts banging me. Bang, bang. I thought I had him.
As the fight continues and the drama builds and builds and builds, you start to see the physical manifestations. Their faces become red. There's a cut on Mancini's ear. And then Kim's face has become a grotesque mask by that 13th round.
This is the challenger, Duke Kim. You may not have heard of him before. You will remember him today, win or lose.
In the 14th round, Ray came out, and he was determined this was going to be it. And he went right to Kim.
The left hook kind of stunned him. I hit him another left hook, it stunned him, and then threw right hand right down the middle and hit him on the chin, and he went down.
Referee Richard Green rightly stopped the fight. Nobody thought that Kim was badly hurt.
I felt that he was, if anything, dehydrated.
His head hit not
10 feet away from me, and his eyes are open. And I don't know if it was my imagination, but to me, I saw his pupils dilate.
I was just so happy because it was such a grueling fight, and so happy that it was over. Nobody knew what was happening to Dooku Kim.
The pupils were dilated, and his pulse was slowing down to nothing. And all the signs were there that he was in trouble. You know, once he just kind of faded away and started to fall off the stool.
The stretcher was sitting right below me, so the fella on my left, and I reached down, got the stretcher, and put the stretcher up in the ring.
We had to get out of the way, so when they carried him out in the stretcher, they carried him right in front of us. And at that time, we just thought, you know, maybe he had a concussion or something.
I wasn't sure how bad he was hurt. I didn't know if it was exhaustion because we hadn't had anybody seriously get hurt in Nevada for maybe 50 years.
At Desert Springs Hospital, neurosurgeon Lonnie Hammergren awaited Kim's arrival.
I knew he was in trouble breathing, and he was comatose. We found, just as I expected, the blood clot, a torn vein inside the dura on the right side of his head, caused bleeding, and that bleeding caused high pressure. After I completed surgery, I examined him again and examined him several times after that, and I never saw any real responsiveness.
He was sore, man. I remember putting him in bed, laying him down and going for ice bags, and we just had the bed on both sides everywhere just packed with ice.
My hands were swollen, my eyes swollen up. I'm laying on my bed. My mother got an ice pack on one eye, ice pack on the other hand. My sister's holding it on one eye, I got it on the other hand, and my mother's sobbing over me.
Boom Boom Mancini was preparing to celebrate his victory by attending Frank Sinatra's performance at Caesar's Palace that night, when he learned of the severity of Dooku Kim's condition.
Dave Wolf comes into the room with Murphy Griffith, and he said, "Ray, it don't look good." Dave said his brain's bleeding and that he lapsed into a coma, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to come out of it.
It was as though I had hit Ray in the chest with a 2x4. He just gulped and stared at me with his mouth open, and I said, "Ray, this is something you're going to have to deal with."
The next day, in a ballroom of the Tropicana Hotel, Mancini's parish priest led a mass said in Kim's honor.
Father O'Neill did a wonderful eulogy about God hasn't planned. This guy came in to win this fight. He had a dream and a goal. Who's to say it could have been either one? Why him? You know, not Ray. And that is what really, really bothered me. That really tortured me that night. It could have been me.
He went from being literally on top of the world in the fight game to feeling guilty about something that he certainly was not responsible for. But the reality was that he was in the ring with a man that was not going to make it.
I was looking down at my hands, going, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that that happened, that somebody's life or death at my, you know, because of what I did with my hands. My faith in God is the only thing that carried me through that. I said my prayers that, you know, God, please help me to find the answers, whatever, please, I need answers. Help me to find a peace. Let me find peace in this.
As Kim lay in a coma, a representative of the Korean government arrived from Los Angeles. Later, Kim's mother flew in from halfway around the world.
She looked so sad, so pathetic, so all alone. Here she is in this foreign country, can't speak the language. She was really such a totally sympathetic figure.
The doctor in charge told me that, medically speaking, his brain is dead. She began to realize that the thing is not going in the right way. 3 days after she arrived, she asked me to ask the doctor to disconnect the life supporting system.
The body of Duke Koo Kim will be flown to Korea today for burial. The young boxer died during the night after doctors declared him legally dead and disconnected his life support system.
The death watch ended November 17th. At the consent of his mother, Kim's kidneys were transplanted, but plans to remove his heart were halted when the intended recipient said it would be difficult to live with the publicity. Kim's fiancée, who was 3 months pregnant with his son, would marry him posthumously.
I prayed to God so that Kim would live. I really hoped to see him again. So his death was a huge shock to me. I wandered for a while. It took almost 1 year to feel somewhat easy on Kim's death. Kim was my best friend.
Koreans felt a lot of pity for him then. They felt sorry that he did not win and wished that he would have come back alive, even if he had lost. Many people were depressed.
I went there when they were lowering the coffin into the grave. Because of his death, South Korea has become well known among the nations. And his death showed Koreans' tenacity, courage, and self-confidence to America.
General MacArthur once said the Korean was the finest fighting man in the world. Once I saw the fight, I kind of saw what MacArthur meant. Duke Koo Kim died that day because they fought at a level where somebody was gonna die.
Only 17 months after losing his brother, Mancini struggled to make sense of Kim's death.
It was a great win. It was a great win. It was a great fight, a great win. But after that, there was nothing good about it. Nothing. It just took it all away from me. The joy, the passion, all that was gone.
Raymond wouldn't talk about it for the longest time. It was in the late 90s, maybe, before I even heard him say that name.
2.5 months after the tragic incident, Mancini was in Italy for his next fight when Kim's mother committed suicide in South Korea. Beyond her grief, she was despondent over a family struggle for her son's $20,000 purse and $5,000 death benefit.
His mother was so frustrated and sad to see that kind of situation. I lost my son, but you are fighting over the money. I'm so sad. I'll go my way. I'll take my own life.
The stories about his mother committing suicide just kept the ongoing story of Kim's death blowing in our faces long after it might otherwise have subsided.
In still another tragic twist, 7.5 months after Kim's death, referee Richard Green was found dead at his North Las Vegas home with what was ruled a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
I knew Richard Green, and I know people who knew Richard Green, and I couldn't say with accuracy that he committed suicide because of the Duke Koo Kim tragedy.
He really felt bad. He always expressed to me that he just wished he had some kind of sign to tell him, hey, the kid had enough. He would say that when he thought about stepping in, that's when the kid would come back with another punch.
One can see, of course, a chain of events triggered by Kim's death. At the end of a Shakespearean tragedy, the stage is littered with bodies. You had that here.
Mancini was a tremendously popular fighter, and so you had a tremendous television audience watching this on a Saturday afternoon at home. And in effect, you had millions of people who were witness to a man dying as a result of being hit by another person. Now that's very traumatic for anyone.
I think that boxing never overcame the negativity of that death.
Right against the rope.
As was the case in 1962, when Benny "Kid" Paret died at the hands of Emil Griffith, the networks would turn their backs on what was once a ratings winner. In the wake of Duke Koo Kim's death, boxing commissions and regulators dictated medical reforms that included more extensive physicals and shortening championship fights from 15 rounds to 12.
That turned out to be a wise move. I think a lot of the serious damage occurs when a fighter is dehydrated, when he's tired, when he's gone through a whole fight.
We went to 12 rounds because the last 3 rounds, what they call the championship rounds, more people had gotten hurt in those last 3 rounds than in the previous 12.
There's no medical proof to substantiate that more accidents and fatalities happen in the last 3 rounds as opposed to the first 12. None. It's absolute nonsense.
After Kim's death, Ray Mancini's appeal to Madison Avenue disintegrated.
Death is hard to sell. Having been in advertising, I know that you're looking for upbeat, happy thoughts. And Ray Mancini, having, in the vernacular, not my words, the people viewing him as having killed a man, all of a sudden, he was radioactive. The advertisers just went away.
There was a cereal deal. There was a soft drink deal. There was an apparel deal. All of those disappeared. Ray had become a pariah.
In the ring, however, Mancini continued to dominate, winning the next 4 fights, 3 by knockout. Then in June of 1984, he met the WBA's #1 contender, Livingstone Bramble, whose pre-fight strategy was to recall one of Mancini's darkest memories.
The lead-up to the fight was very ugly because Bramble called Ray a murderer.
I want him to be mad. I made him mad. I said stuff that would piss him off. I aggravated. I did everything to piss this man off. So if he had any doubts about the Duke Koo Kim fight or even thinking about it, those anger would overcome that. And I think it did.
2 days before, Ray didn't feel well. He was running a fever. And I told him, let's call off the fight. He said, no way, I'm going through with this. I'm not going to let Bramble say that I ran away from him.
There was a moment in this fight that changed Ray Mancini's career completely. He had always had trouble with left-handers. Livingstone Bramble switched to the left-handed stance about 4 rounds into this fight, and it completely altered the entire fight.
If it's 12 rounds, I win the title. I hold on to my title. I'm going to hit on all 3 cards because I'm slapping him to death. But I just couldn't move. My legs were dead. And finally, in that 14th round, I had nothing to keep him off me with, and he came on and caught me. And that's one of the biggest disappointments of my life, is when I lost him in Buffalo.
8 months later, Mancini lost again to Bramble. Over the next 7 years, he came out of retirement twice, dropping both bouts. In 1992, he quit for good with a 29-5 record. Living in Los Angeles, Boom Boom had already started a second career. After trying his hand at acting, Mancini has moved behind the camera and in 2007 formed 2 production companies.
I'm producing films. I've acted in 18 films. I've done off-Broadway stage. I've done TV. I enjoy it.
I just made a movie with Ray, and I loved working with him. He's a terrific actor because he's got the best things that an actor can be. You know, he's honest, and he's sad. You know, all fighters are sad.
Ray is moving into the producing end of things, and some of the qualities that I think you need to be good, he's got. Tenaciousness, concentration. He never backs up, you know, just like in his fighting style. It's like a pit bull.
20 years after the fight in Las Vegas, Kim's image was brought back to life on the big screens of South Korea in a film called Champion. Invited to Seoul by the producers, Mancini was warmly received at the premiere. For Kim, his death made him a legend.
I've managed a private house, providing bed and meals for travelers. They always ask me to see his grave. The place has not been kept well for a long time. As a village leader, I would take care of Kim's grave from now on as a place to cherish the memory of Dooku Kim.
But for Mancini, the tragedy not only remains a vivid memory a quarter of a century later, it also has touched his 3 children, especially his oldest.
My daughter was in grade school, and the kids were taunting her. Your father's a murderer, your father's a murderer, he killed somebody, right?
I cried, and I mentioned it to my dad because I didn't know about any of it. And then he kind of like sat and told me the story.
And Ray makes a decision to show her a tape of the fight and let his daughter judge for herself. And at the end of the viewing, she turns to her father and she says, "Daddy, you didn't kill anybody. It was something that happened in boxing."
No child should be responsible for sins of their father. That's what bothered me the most. And I tell you the truth, that's the reason why I'm doing this story now.
His legacy is the kid from Youngstown who won the title for his dad. And I would hope that's the first sentence in his obituary. There's another part of his legacy too, which is the death of Dooku Kim.
Ray Mancini is a friend of mine, and we talked about that fight against Dooku Kim, and it has bothered him for a while. And how he deals with that has been very difficult.
Every November, he starts to feel what he calls anxieties, bad feelings. Ray Mancini has to deal with the death of a man who earned his utmost respect, and that will haunt him for the rest of his life.
My brother passed on Valentine's Day, so I never celebrate Valentine's Day. November 13th is a day of grieving for me. I grieve for that day in remembrance of Kim and his family, and I always will.